Hello, this is Faith at Faith and Books. How are you doing? I got a haircut. Did you notice? I got it for my birthday, which was this past Thursday, but I kind of need to wash it. It's doing weird things. So anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and make this video anyway, because this is my opportunity. So I haven't made one in a couple of weeks because I was getting sick. I think the last video I made, I was coming down with something and it really walloped me. I was, in bed for about three and a half days, and I started to feel better. But then it was like sort of a slow recovery, and then Passover and Easter came and went, which turned out fine. It turned out good. And then this past week, I had one extra child to watch because the 7-year-old had his spring break. So it was a very busy week. Took a lot of energy. But anyway, let me talk about the books that I've read. So I managed to read 3. And the first one is one that is a middle grade one, The Wheel on the School by Mindart DeJong. I had been reading this out loud to the 7-year-old over breakfast, so school days, for about 5 minutes. I would read to him while he ate his cereal or his scrambled eggs or something. And so we didn't read on the weekends, and if he had the day off for some reason, or sometimes like I went through a period where I had laryngitis, I couldn't read to him, or every once in a while there'd be some sort of crisis, like we can't find his school shoes or something like that, or he has to finish homework that he didn't finish or he forgot about, and then we wouldn't get to it. So it was 5 or 4 times a week for about 5 minutes I would read to him. So I think we started this, I thought we started it in January. He said December. We read it in very short snippets over a long period of time. But this is a wonderful book. I give it 5 stars. This is the 3rd time I've read it now. And it's not one I read as a child, but I read it to my own kids, and then I've read it to my grandson. And it's just a really charming, lovely tale. It's about this tiny fishing village in the Netherlands that exists because of a dike, keeps the ocean from washing it away, basically. And it's a tiny little isolated village. And the one of the little girls that's in the school only has 6 students, 1 girl and 5 boys. And she wonders why they don't have storks in their little village of Shora, which is the name of the village. And she finds out that they did have, so storks migrate from Africa and they nest in Europe. And the tradition is that you put a wagon wheel up on your roof and the stork will nest there, and they're considered good luck. So, but her village doesn't have that. And so she finds out that they used to, but there had been a terrible storm that had damaged the one house that had the wheel up on it. And that was where the schoolhouse now stood. And so she tells the teacher about this, and the teacher makes it like this school project. Well, it winds up unifying the whole village. So the old people and the young people and the women, and even the fishermen that go out to sea for days on end, even they get involved in it. And so the whole project really brings the village together, and we get to know a number of people in the village. One character that stands out is Janus, Janus, who has lost his legs. He was a fisherman. He lost his legs. The rumor is that they were bitten off by a shark, and he's just a grumpy, mean old man in this wheelchair. And the kids get to know him, and it's really heartwarming. And there's lots of danger and adventure while they try to achieve this goal of putting a wagon wheel up on the schoolhouse roof. So it's just a really charming book where you really get a sense of place, of being in that kind of desolate place off the North Sea, in the flatlands that have been reclaimed from the sea by a dike, and just the people there. And it's just a really, really charming story. And it's a testament to it that even though we read it in tiny little snippets, the 7-year-old always knew exactly what was going on. Like, he always remembered exactly what was going on and who was who, and he was really engrossed by it. So it was a really charming read, and I highly recommend it to read aloud to kids or grandkids. And if you want to read something heartwarming, I recommend it. And I just saw a video, maybe I'll link below, to Lizzie Fade Reads, I think is the name of her channel. And they're doing another middle grade readathon. And apparently May was the original middle grade readathon, because she was saying it started 10 or 11 years ago. And then it became March, middle grade March, but it used to be May. And so there is another middle grade read along, which sounds great because March is so crowded with March of the Mammoths and March Mystery Madness. And so if you missed the opportunity to read middle grade, you've got another one in May. So I'll link to her announcement video. There's a bunch of, coordinators or whatever, hosts. Anyway, so this was the first read, 5 stars, really good. The second read that I completed was The Cloud of Unknowing. And I didn't quite finish this in Lent. It was my Lenten read. It was a read-along. I was actually asked to be a co-host along with Christy Lewis at Dostoevsky in Space, and Emma at The Bookish Princess, and Victoria at the musical Bookworm. And I didn't finish it before Easter, but I finished it up on Thursday, I think. And we just had our discussion yesterday afternoon, at least my time, and our Zoom discussion, and it was a really good discussion. I felt like I talked too much, but I enjoyed the discussion a lot, and I found this a very valuable read. I think I need to reread it because I think I had an attitude problem when I was reading it, because it's about contemplative prayer, and I don't feel like a very contemplative person, and so I always had to get over that mental block every time I picked it up. And he would say something and I would want to quarrel with it, and then he would go on to explain, and most of the time I got it. I was like, oh, okay. And I just had that pattern the whole time I read it. So I think if I read it again, I won't have that issue, and I'll just be absorbing a lot more of it. So I think it's not a long book, and there's a lot of wisdom in it. There's a lot of nuanced thinking. There's a lot of practical ideas or advice for, bettering your spiritual life. So I think I really want to reread it, and I also want to read the second book that, what is it called? This volume includes 2 books by the same anonymous author. I don't know how they know it's the same person, but they don't know who he is. Where is it? Wait a second, let me find it. The Book of Privy Counseling, yeah. So anyway, I want to revisit this because I think it will be worthwhile. So that was a good and valuable read, and I'm so glad I was invited to co-host, to read it. So that was good. And then the last book that I just finished reading it, and I haven't, it was on my Kindle. Let me see if I can pull it up. I always try to do this when I'm making a video, and I always stumble about and I can't pull it up, right? Let's see if I can. Okay, hit the right button. Let's see, here we go. So let's go back to the beginning. So I can show you the cover. It was called Riceyman Steps, and I had no idea what it was about, and I had never heard. Oh, why is it doing that? Anyway, can you read that? Riceyman's. I had never heard of Arnold Bennett. I'd never heard of Riceyman Steps before. This was for the Faded Pages Book Club. I think it was written back in the 1920s, maybe 1923, I want to say. Is that right? Because that would make it 100 years old. And I had, like I said, I'd never heard of this author, but apparently he's a popular author, British author, and he wrote a lot of books. I think he was like turn of the century into the 20s. I thought it was really depressing. It was an easy to read book. It flowed well. So I don't think he's a bad writer. I just didn't like the characters. I couldn't relate to the characters. It was very bleak. And I just couldn't relate to the characters. I didn't understand them. There were things going on. It felt very Freudian to me, like, because it was all about these power struggles and these romantic relationships and who had power. And there was sort of an underlying, or not so underlying, but just that, women didn't mind being beaten. I didn't understand why the women were in love with the men they were in love with. One of the characters, who's like the char woman, the cleaning lady, she was a very simple character, but she was nice. She had a good heart. So I could relate to the most. Not that it's because I have a especially good heart or anything, but just she was more appealing. But the other woman, I didn't understand her at all. And I didn't understand the man who had the bookshop. He was an awful person. I just didn't get it. I just really struggled with it a lot. Now, the ending kind of, got momentum, and I think I enjoyed the ending more than I did, the first 3/4 of the book. I don't know. Maybe I would give it 3 stars, which to me it was worth completing, but I don't know if I would recommend. 4 is I enjoyed it enough that I would recommend to others. 5 is I thought it was brilliant. So I would say 3 because I did finish it, and I'm glad that I was exposed to a new author. To me, I'd never heard of him before, but it's not my cup of tea. I just didn't really. I just really didn't get it. I just didn't get it. Okay, so those are the 3 books that I've read. Let's see, what am I on to now? I am on to, for the little boy, for the 7-year-old, we are now reading A Dog on Barkham Street, which is something I just pulled off my bookshelf, and I bought it at a library sale. I remember this M.S. Stoltz. I think her name's Mary Stoltz. She was a popular writer in the 50s, I think. Yeah, Mary Stoltz. Yeah. So we've just started this one. It's a cute story about a boy who really wants a dog, and he's being bullied by his next door neighbor, and just the things going on in his life. And it's got really nice illustrations. So anyway, so that's our next book for the 7-year-old. And then I'm also reading, I'm supposed to be reading this with Jennifer Brooks, Ovid's Metamorphoses. I think she's preoccupied with a lot of other things, so I don't know how much we're actually buddy reading it, but maybe we are. I'm not sure. We did have one conversation, but I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying it, and I'm disturbed by it at the same time. Ovid writes so lushly, and this translation is such a lush translation. I really am enjoying the language, and Ovid just can really draw you in, and it's you get a real emotional connection. Even though these are just ancient stories that you've heard about before, he gives them more character. And so you feel like you're, he sort of humanizes it a little bit more. There was a quote that I want to read. This was in the notes. The notes are really good in this too. But this quote really struck me because this is Ovidian, he says. Moreover, the Ovidian tone of hyperbole, oh my gosh, of hyperbole, the milking of each situation for the unexpected or for a strained sentimentality prevails. And that's what he is. He's really emotional. He really gets you in the sentiments. And he's very lavish and lush storyteller. So I'm really appreciating his genius in that way. It's very sensual. However, it's disturbing because it's the same tropes over and over again, and it's always the god or goddess disguises themselves, so that's their change, to trick somebody. Usually it's Jove raping somebody or seducing or taking somebody. And then usually a woman, but I don't know. Has there been a situation with Joe? There's a little bit of homosexuality. Oh, somebody's pulling up here. It's just a really disturbing, because just the moral chaos. And then what happens is whoever's gotten seduced or been caught in a terrible situation. One point there's a young man who accidentally stumbles on, it was Diana or somebody who was bathing in a pool, and he saw her, and it was by accident. He didn't do it on purpose, but he gets punished. Everybody, there's a lot of injustice, a lot of unfair anger by the gods or goddesses, especially Juno, angry that Joe fooled around and got somebody pregnant or whatever, and so just a lot of really cruel punishments. And what happens is that the mortals get turned into a tree or into some kind of animal, or something really dire and heartbreaking happens to them, kind of horrific. And it's the same thing over and over again. I mean, I'm only this far, and let's see, it reads to here. So are we just going to go through those same tropes for this whole section? It's just the same thing over and over again. So we'll see. I mean, each of the stories in and of themselves is absorbing, and he writes it very, very well. So I'm not bored yet. It's actually surprisingly easy to read, but it's disturbing. It's really disturbing. Yeah. So I really have mixed feelings, but I'm enjoying the project, and I've actually slacked off the last couple of days, so I have to catch up with my own reading schedule, but I am really, really appreciating this right now. And then the other thing I started reading is Introduction to Christianity. This is sort of a balm for the disturbance that the Ovid is causing, because this is so beautifully written, so insightful, just so noble, rather than being sensual. It's and full of sentiment. It's reason and higher thoughts. Just it's really good. Now I'm also behind on this, but I'm taking copious notes as I read, and I'm so enjoying it. This is Introduction to Christianity by Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger, or Pope Benedict XVI, who just passed away recently. And so I'm reading this with a group, and so far everybody is absolutely loving it. He writes with such clarity, with such grace, with such nuance. It's quite it's understandable. You have to go slow, because he's really talking about deep things, but it's really good. It's like he just looks into your mind or your heart and is explaining things, tensions and kind of reactions and responses that a believing Christian has in the world that we live in. We're very much at odds with the world, and he gets it. It's just so good. It's really good. Now, he wrote this in 1968, right after Vatican II. So, yeah, really, really enjoying this one. I need to get going with it, though. And then let's see. I'm talking too much. Let's see. I did DNF Ben-Hur. I only got a little over halfway through, and then Lent was over. It was a Lenten read, and I lost my motivation. It was very different from the movie. I think the author was trying to do too much with different perspectives, and also just a complicated storyline. And he wrote in kind of a ponderous, stilted, very high Victorian fashion, which I was okay with. Like, if I hadn't given it like the limit that I was going to finish it in Lent, and then I didn't, I think I would have proceeded. I think I would have finished reading it, but I think it would have been a 3-star, unless it got much better the second half. I don't know, but it was just too slow. The pacing was off, and he tried to do too much, and I just couldn't. When I was listening to it, I was absorbed in it, but then I would just forget to pick it up. So So anyway, so it just didn't engage me enough. And then let's see. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say is that I tried to start my Latin studies. And when I was sick, I did a little bit. Then I realized it was just unrealistic. I'm not giving up on that, though. I'm just postponing it. I might start it up the second half of May. The next big thing in my life right now is that my youngest daughter, is graduating from college, and she wanted to have a party. And so we're having a graduation party, and she's invited 50 people. So I have to get my house cleaned up. We're hoping the weather's nice, and we're going to hold most of it outside. But I have to clean my house. And so that's a big thing with a definite deadline. And that's going to cut into reading time for sure. And I'm not going to be able to add studying Latin on to anything. I'm trying to free up May, where I'm just doing the bare minimum in May. And then the other thing I started, I have 2 other books to talk about. I'm going to start this up again. I started reading it at the very beginning of the month. No, at the very end of March. And then I decided I couldn't keep up with it. And I'm actually going back and rereading it. I had read, the first couple of chapters, but now I'm rereading them because I don't quite remember. But it's really atmospheric and exciting, and I'm into it. I think this is going to be a really good read. So I'm happy I'm back with that. And then the other thing I did, this also slowed me down, is I started reading this gargantuan book. I think it's 836 pages, something like that. It's probably a lot of footnotes. It's nonfiction. It doesn't even have anything to do with Historathon. It's just a book that I downloaded a while back on my Kindle because I subscribed to bookgorilla.com, which you should too if you read a lot on the Kindle, because every day they send you discounted books from 49 cents to maybe like $2.99. That's the most I'll pay for anything. But I try to make it just $1.99. But I download books a lot whenever I see one that I think might appeal to me. And one night I didn't have a Kindle read, and I looked at the stuff I had downloaded, and I saw the book called Trampling Out the Vintage, and I forget the author, but it is a history of the United Farm Workers Union, which is a topic I'm actually really interested in. I remember as a child the grape boycott, and I remember I really liked grapes as a child. I remember my mom one summer not buying them. She said they were boycotting them because they treat the workers so badly. We want to help the workers, and that's why we're not buying the grapes. So and that was the first time I had heard the name Chavez, Cesar Chavez, or Cesar Chavez. I always mispronounce that. Who started the United Farm Workers. So this book is this huge history of the whole movement from way before the condition of the mine workers, not mine workers, that's my grandfather. He was in the United Mine Workers. No, the farm workers, just from, like before the Depression even, and then all the way through till it collapsed, I guess, in the 1980s. I'm not sure what happened to it. I lost track of it, but I kept hearing of Chavez's name, and I remember when he passed away. And so I'm really interested. I do really enjoy labor history because, my family I come from a labor family. My grandfather, I might link to an article about him from The Nation. My grandfather was John Brophy, and he worked for the United Mine Workers, and then he later was one of the founders of the CIO. And then on my mother's side, I'm descended from Samuel Gompers, who started the AFL. And this was back in my grandfather was really active in the 30s, 40s, and 50s in the labor movement, which is when it was really in its ascendancy, and then things kind of collapsed, and I really think we need a new labor movement. But anyway, so I'm interested. I should know, at this point in my life, I should know a lot more about labor history because my family was so involved in labor, and my aunt, who I dearly loved and who lived with us for a while, she spent her whole life in labor studies. I should know way much more than I do. So I'm really enjoying this gargantuan book, and I have to say the author, whose name I cannot remember, first name is Fred. It reads like a novel. He really writes very well. It's really, really compelling stuff to me. So I'm only 19%. I feel like I've been reading it forever, and it says I'm at 19%. It's an enormous book, but I'm just going to keep chipping away at it. I really enjoyed the subject matter, learning about the subject matter. Okay, I have talked way too long, so I will talk to you later, and I hope you're doing well, and happy reading. Bye.